Now see, there are a few things that people can all collectively agree on. Especially nowadays with all the news we hear on social media about how the world is slowly burning before our eyes, it's easier than ever to make enemies. But there's one thing that people will agree on. Most people really like bread. We as humans have been eating bread for close to 14,500 years, and it's clear to see why. Bread is cheap, easy to make, is good for you, and can be made pretty much anywhere in the world. Bread has almost single-handedly kept civilizations afloat and prevented mass starvation by providing a means of those of lower social classes to be able to actually eat. Even way back in the Paleolithic period, hunter-gatherer tribes from the Fertile Crescent were using stone tools to crack grains and mix them with water to form porridges 30,000 years ago. But how does such a humble food survive 14,500 years and still remain a staple food in modern society? Well, it's actually pretty easy to see if you look at the history of bread. To do that, however, we need to go back some time ago.
It's your boy Soulja Boy in Dubai. Look at that camel behind me though, scratching his neck. Turn up. I got the Louis shoes dirty, goddamn.
Ancient Egypt, the land of sand, mummies, pharaohs, and sand. See, apart from all the other weird stuff that Egypt had going on at the time with cats and wrapping dead people in bandages, they actually knew what they were doing. But if you had a look around ancient Egypt, hell, if you had a look around modern Egypt, you'd notice one pretty big thing. The entire place is not only very hot, but also very dry. And in a time where you don't have trucks or planes to import food from other areas, it's not the best thing to not be able to grow many things in your own backyard. Especially with all the pyramids and sphinxes being built and whatnot, you have to feed your workers something at some point. But see, the ancient Egyptians were in luck, for they were able to grow a lot of two different things in their arid sandpit, barley and emmer wheat. You've probably heard of barley before, but emmer wheat is a bit more of an obscure grain. See, it's actually not very similar to modern wheat in that it's a tetraploid. A tetraploid wheat is normally used for livestock nowadays, but tends to have a greater yield and is higher in sugar content. Emmer wheat also tends to be higher in protein, which would be a great protein source for poorer labourers who couldn't always get their hands on good old animal meats. The Egyptians were more than willing to grind these grains down and mix them together with water to form doughs, placing them in clay pots known as bedja molds, and leaving them to bake in hot ash. The end result is believed to be some form of sourdough that will be given to the pyramid workers as wages. To be completely honest, if I was paid in loaves of bread, I would have to start shooting at some point. Eventually, the majority of ancient Egyptian people caught onto this new trend, and it became less of a struggle meal, being eaten by labourers and pharaohs alike. Bread was the first food that didn't require foraging or hunting, which made it a staple food for citizens that would have normally had to go out and wait for ages to lure animals to a watering hole before flinging volleys of arrows, spears, or throwing sticks at them. But there's only so many crackly, ashy loaves you can eat before you start to get fed up of it, especially the labourers who were eating mostly bread every day. So the Egyptians had the bright idea to form the doughs into different shapes and cook them. This led to bread adopting many different variations, such as the flatbread that is so commonly eaten across Asia and Africa, the spiral bread found in Ramesses III's tomb, and other weird, unique adobe experiments. But see, the Egyptians noticed one thing that was pretty interesting. All this grain led them to realize that they could make a whole bunch of beer, and considering this was pre-Islam Egypt, they had no protest against getting their drink on. So they took the cooked loaves of bread and mixed them with water, leaving them to ferment in heated ceramic jars. This led to a fruitier drink than most modern beers. Dates and honey would later be added to the beer for flavouring and a higher alcohol content, producing a thick red beer. Eventually, the cultivation of grains for bread making spread across the Mediterranean to Greece, where they really liked the little solid balls of energy. They began to experiment with new techniques such as sifting the flour and incorporating fresh ingredients like olives, honey, and herbs into their bread. And this trend was like a viral STD because everybody in the party was catching it, including your mother. The Mayans in America grew corn and invented tortillas, which became a staple for the Mayan and Aztec diet. Portuguese sailors also eventually brought bread to Japan in the 16th century, who mass-produced the loaves as a convenient food source for hungry soldiers, and the Chinese also began to make steamed buns known as mantou and unleavened wheat bread known as bing after obtaining it through their Silk Road trade routes. Not only that, the Indus Valley civilizations were also making chapatis made from the wheat that was farmed by the Harappan people. Heck, even the Europeans began to commonly eat bread during the Middle Ages, with wheat bread becoming the cultural norm and the wide favourite. Poorer people would make rye loaves, with rice, peas, lentils or chestnuts incorporated into the mix. So after all of this, what have we all learned? Well, I seem to have picked up two things from working on this video. Bread is good and bread is important. I mean, even nowadays, 80% of the population consume bread, with the US alone eating close to 7 billion kilograms of it every year. And me personally, I think I prefer it that way.